All right. Hello, everybody. This is a brand new series, and I'm happy to say it's my first collaborative series on my channel. I'm joined here by Brian from Massey's Main Entertainment. You all know Brian. He is him and Rich Strickler are probably the two biggest collaborators on YouTube. They've got all sorts of series they're constantly working through, and I mentioned this to Brian earlier on message, but Brian's one of those guys. For those again that are joining on my channel who might not know Brian, Brian is very open-minded with music. He's got a wide palette for tunes, and I'm just happy to have him on this new series here where we are doing an old idea. It's been done by several different channels. I know again, I mentioned my buddy Rich and Brian's buddy Rich. He's done this before, where we talk about an album that we've essentially given the other guy, and we just kind of want to know their take on it. It could be a favorite album that we like. It could be an album maybe that, down the line, maybe an album that we don't care for as much, but we want to see if the other guy might enjoy it. This series can go a million different ways with the albums that we choose. And obviously, because this is episode 1, we didn't have an intro episode where we're being filmed showing the albums that we chose. We were just texting each other some ideas and kind of determined the 2 albums that we're going to be looking at today. And so today's inaugural episode, we have Brian going with the choice from my catalog. I gave Brian the album Long Lost by Lord Huron, who are kind of an indie pop group, indie Americana. I don't even know what you would want to call them, dream pop kind of thing. It's their 4th studio album from 2021 called Long Lost, a personal favorite of mine, and I can get into that later on. And Brian gave me the suggestion to do 1988's Fisherman's Blues by the Waterboys. There you go. Which ironically is also the 4th album. So we're giving each other senior year albums there. Didn't know that when we handed them out, but kind of a Scottish folk punk ish album. So two different styles of music here. Kind of a nice different a good difference of two different styles here. So what we're going to do is Brian's going to start us off. He's going to kind of run down his take on the album on Long Lost, give me his opinion on it, and I'm going to follow him up talking about Fisherman's Blues. And then at the end of the episode, we're going to then we might give the album a ranking out of 10, and then we will recommend the next albums for episode 2, which will be in a week or 2. So Brian, with all that to be said, thank you for doing this, and I can't wait to hear what you think about this album by Lord Huron.
No, I appreciate you doing this, Sam, inviting me to do it. I mean, I like doing these things. Like you said, I like to take my palette and like really put it to the test with a bunch of different music, and then I like doing the same thing to other people. I know that like others that I've done this with, like Randy Nelson, will say I think Brian's just messing with me. I think at one time I gave him an Icelandic trip hop band to do. I think it was Sigur Ros's Augustus Bidian, and of course poor Randy had to try to pronounce all the track names, which it was all in his made up language and half Icelandic language, but half made up as well. So it was kind of interesting messing with Randy a little bit. But as far as Lord Huron, I really appreciate you giving me this one, because this was their 4th album. I think they only have 4. Did they release any more after 2021?
Yeah, they just released a new single, so their 5th should be coming this year.
Right. Yeah. So I've run their discography other than this album before we did this. So, and since we gave each other these albums, I listened to it 3 complete times, and then just the tracks that I had marked on Spotify that I really liked. Mm-hmm. And then I went back and just listened to those tracks today before we met and everything. But like you said, album came out in I think it was May of 2021. It's got this really nice rich tapestry of sounds, and I think that this airy and etheric sound scheme that they have that's kind of mixed with outlaw country and a little bit of rock and roll and just enough strings to make it like a Baroque pop thing. But at the same time, the lyrics and the content that he's singing about is very much grounded. It's not so open. Then I think that's what makes that the album work really well together. Some of my favorite tracks on here, and I took a lot of little notes here. So if I'm kind of going back and forth with my head, I just that's the reason why. Obviously, the first track that jumps right out, because I think that there's like 16 tracks on here, but I think 5 of them are like little skits.
Yeah.
And then there's a really long track that's just a musical at the end. I think it's like 14 minutes long. But the second track, first song actually, was Mine Forever. And that just like immediately hooks you in. It's got this weird spaghetti Western type feel to it. The tones on their guitar is very much like a, Sergio Leone, Ennio Morricone type Western film. I think somebody calls it countrypolitan strings when they incorporate those together. But I thought that was just so the lyrics on that. I just wanted to read one set of lyrics to that one. I love it because it's this weird contradiction. He says, if you ever want to see my face again, I want to know. If you ever get lonely, please let me know. If you never want to see my face again, I'll understand. If forever gets lonely, take my hand. So it's almost like saying that even if you want me, great, I'll take you back. Even if you don't want me and you get lonely, I'll take you back. That type of thing. So that's kind of this contradiction in love. The next track that I liked, of course, was Love Me Like You Used To. Kind of stands out this little melancholy track, a little bit of orchestration, acoustic guitars kind of blended in. I thought it was a nice segue. It kind of reminded me, and you could speak to this a little bit more because I know you're a fan, like Marty Robbins, Jim Reeves type of sound to it. And then Meet Me in the City comes right after that. Again, it's got these rural themes kind of mixed with an urban narrative in it that I thought was really cool. Got this great backdrop of city life imagery and things, which I thought was a really great contradiction to what was going on in the other 2 tracks. Long Lost, it's another poignant ballad that kind of has themes of memory and yearning. Again, it's a spaghetti Western, but this one had also like a film noir kind of feel to it. Some more twang, more blues in the guitar work and stuff. And then the one that kind of maybe my favorite track now that I've listened to it several times is Not Dead Yet, which reminded me like this, maybe some Ricky Nelson meets, what's his name? Eddie John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band. That kind of rock and roll, that spirited early, maybe late 50s, early 60s rock and roll that I thought was excellent. I mean, the track kind of had this spirited rhythm, very catchy chorus, celebrating the resilience and the zest for life. And I thought that was great. And the last track really to speak of that I really enjoyed was I Lied, which was a duet with Alison Pontier. And it's a duet that talks about the complexities of regret and confession, and it's kind of interplayed between the male and the female voice, which I think adds a lot of depth to the narrative. Again, great work with the acoustic guitars and the subtle strings mixed in there. I think this track, probably more than a lot of them, makes it maybe how you could classify them as a Baroque pop band or maybe a chamber pop band to some extent, which will probably get more of their alternative type of flavor that people would, if they like listening to alternative country, then this is definitely a track that they should latch on to. Obviously it was highly touted by the critics, won all sorts of little awards and ranked really high on the charts. I just think it's a great pick for me, Sam. I really appreciate you giving me this album. I like it better, I would say, now that I've listened to it several times. Before going in, I've been like, well, is it better than Strange Tales? And I'm like, yeah, this is. I think this album's better than Strange Tales. So
yeah.
So.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I've talked about it ad nauseum on my channel. It was, one of the reasons I gave it to you was because, I mean, it was my favorite album of 2021. It's quickly becoming one of my favorite albums of all time, if it's not already in my, top 20. I think it's an absolute masterpiece of an album. I mean, you know, even the ending, side D of the album, which is that Times Blur,
yeah,
of just like this ethereal, like kind of merging all these sounds. It's almost like they've painted the picture, but like here's the rest of the paint kind of like melting almost off the canvas. And it's just, very ethereal, very, it makes you think. There's not a lot of depth to it, but it sets the ending for the record. And it is one of those records. It's hard to pick and choose individual tracks, because I think they even mention, I know they mentioned on the CD at least, to play it all the way through. Like it's not an album.
Yeah.
Like it's an art piece. It really is. And Ben Schneider, who's like the lead creative force, he was an art student. He was an artist before he was a musician. And so all of his albums have this, theme to them. And, even like the music videos for this album and the packaging of the album, he has meaning behind everything that he does. And I know the song "I Lied." I mean, I think to me, it's one of the greatest breakup songs ever. Just about, you're in a relationship with somebody, you tell them you love them, but then obviously it doesn't work. So in a way, like, there is a lie, maybe like it's a complex thing, and it does work well with the two vocalists, with Alison Pontier, who's, really kind of an unknown, even still. But just to have those two voices really, really makes the track shine. So
I think I got to listen to it maybe one more time. I think the last track grew on me. The first time I heard it, I go, I don't know whether it belonged or not. At first, the very first time I listened to it, I thought, why did they do this? Was it because, it's all mostly it's instrumental. So you're like, well, I think if you keep it thematically, you could always just say, well, maybe this is riding off into the sunset type of thing. You know what I mean? I don't, that's what I think now, a little bit of reflection on it, but it warrants the future listens to make sure that that's kind of the vibe I'm going for, I guess.
So I'll go ahead and ask before I get into mine. What would you give this a ranking out of 10, or is it too soon to
no, I would say right now, I would say, I mean, if I can kind of base it off of, there's legitimately 11 tracks on here, and I put a check mark beside 8 of them.
Wow.
So that, to me, that means approximately out of 11, I liked 8. I would probably give it like a 7.75 or 8.
Great.
At this point.
Yeah, that's great after just a couple of listens, for a new album. So no, that's great. I'm glad it kind of piqued your interest. So now I'll move then into Brian's pick for me, which is Fisherman's Blues, again from the Waterboys, who, other than hearing them, really, I've heard Brian talk about them a lot. I've heard our buddy Randy Nelson talk about them a lot. I didn't know really anything about them going in. And I'm still, very, very new to this. So I was, happy to have this, because it kind of gave me a reason to finally sit down and listen to, a record by these guys that I've heard about the last couple of years watching Brian's channel. And, listening to it, I was kind of surprised. Going into it, for some reason, I was thinking it was going to be more, for some reason in my mind, I was thinking maybe rockabilly, because just, from my remembering, and, from what I understand, this album was kind of a change in direction musically for them from their first 3. Again, I haven't been able to sample any of the earlier stuff or the, later stuff, but when I saw the cover of just the record, seeing it, through streaming, I was like, oh, okay, maybe that's not what this is. And then when I started it and heard the title track, Fisherman's Blues, which is a great, kind of a, that Scotch folk punk kind of sound that, groups even like early U2 were kind of doing stuff like that, using, those, like mandolins and, fiddles and things that, were big in Celtic music. To hear that off the title track, and then listening to the title track, I was like, I know this song. And I immediately knew where I knew it from, which was the movie Waking Ned Devine.
Yes.
That's the song played during the opening credits, which is one of my favorite movies, especially, at St. Patrick's Day time. So I was like, okay, I know this. But then like listening to other songs on the album, they switch, they stick to those, you know, Scottish sounds, and you know that kind of Celtic sound, but they're able to jump around a bit. Like they do more traditional stuff. Like they do a couple of like shorter, you know, 2-minute tracks, that are more like, you know, Scottish reels. Um, and then again, you get, you know, more poetic stuff like The Stolen Child, which is the last full track. You know, they have little snippets. Like the last track is like almost like a drunken pub version of This Land Is Your Land by Woody Guthrie, where they're getting the lyrics wrong and everything. But it fits with the whole tone of the album. And I mean, it's a longer album. It's I think it was like 55 minutes or so, 54 minutes and some change. Which is fine. You know, obviously, I mean, I think Long Lost is probably close to 50, maybe, especially with that last track.
It was like 58 minutes, I think.
Yeah. So, you know, we both gave each other a couple of, you know, zingers to go into this. So, yeah, again, I didn't know anything about the Waterboys. Mike Scott obviously is the creative force behind it, and you know, he's still out there touring it. And there was the joke I was reading that the Waterboys have had, you know, more members than any group. Like 70 something players have come through. But you know, you have Fisherman's Blues, then you have like the 7-minute kind of epic for We Will Not Be Lovers, which I really like that song a lot. That was actually the last track I was listening to before we started the video. I really like that song a lot. Skipping down to track 4, World Party, which apparently was based off of Live Aid, like the themes to it. I really enjoyed that too. A lot of, you know, kind of, you know, tiered meanings behind that song. But I really did enjoy that as well. Yeah, I think there are people like compared it to like some of like the later Beatles tracks, like on the White Album because of the piano playing, kind of like McCartney doing, you know, Martha My Dear and that kind of stuff. And then what I was surprised to hear, for those that know me, I'm a big Van Morrison fan. And then to hear them do a 7-minute version of the Astral Weeks tune, Sweet Thing, and kind of this like gritty, you know, that full on Scotch accent, you know, coming through. But instrumentation was pretty much in line with the Van Morrison, with like the guitars and, you know, the cool kind of jazzy chords. The fiddle was playing, but you have this like punk vibe to like the vocals to it. So it's kind of like a paradox with the lyrics. And then you got like this like gruffer voice than Van Morrison's voice on the Astral Weeks record, which, you know, came out 20 years before this album. And then again, one of those little reels, you have Jimmy Hickey's Waltz, which I enjoy like the traditional Celtic music. Like I'm a big fan of the Chieftains. Like I like the Chieftains a lot. So to hear that was, you know, was cool. And then I guess like the second biggest track, and a Bang on the Ear, which is 9 minutes and 14 seconds long. I think that was released as one of the singles from the album. That one's one that I think I need to listen to more because it's so sprawling, and you know, you can obviously tell they have a Van Morrison influence in some of their you know, that they're pulling from poetry and from local history and that kind of, and obviously, you know, using the vernacular of the, you know, the country.
Yeah, I think a bang on the ear means a kiss on the cheek.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I really, you know, I enjoyed it. One of the other songs I enjoy, again, with my country element to my style, is Has Anybody Here Seen Hank?
Yeah,
I really like that tune a lot. Just, you know, pretty straight ahead country type tune. That, you know, is probably one of my top 3 favorites on the album. Probably, you know, skipping ahead a bit, again, going to The Stolen Child, which is the last true track on the record. The words are by W.B. Yeats, the Irish poet. So that one to me was probably the most dated in terms of like the music on it than any of the other ones. The rest of the songs, it could have been put out in the 70s. It could have been put out today. This was the one that I think that like kind of like made me think, oh yeah, this is an 80s record. It has that 80s production to it. And the instruments to me was just slightly off for me. It wasn't my favorite track. Actually, it's probably my least favorite on the album. which I guess is, a tribute to Mike Scott because he didn't write the words. So,
Right. Yeah.
My least favorite was one of the, covers, I guess. And like I said, they closed with like this kind of a fade into the Woody Guthrie tune, "This Land Is Your Land." But yeah, I think my biggest surprise for it was not the type of music that I was expecting going into it. I picked it based off of the fact that it's one of, I know it's one of your favorites, it's one of Randy's favorites. You both speak very highly of the Waterboys, and I was very pleasantly surprised to hear it, with those traditional Celtic elements to it that I like, again, with Van Morrison, with the Chieftains, with some U2 that I like as well. So I was really happy with this. It's one, if I saw the vinyl out in the wild, I would pick it up. It's one that I could see myself listening to, especially next month, going into St. Patrick's Day, one of those type of records. It does put me kind of in this like rainy Celtic, town, listening to it. And you do feel like you're kind of off of a wharf, watching the fishermen come in and out all day long. But I really enjoyed the record. It's one that's I think it's gonna keep growing on me. And yeah, like you with Long Lost, I think, right now at this point, I would probably have it between, like a 7.5 to an 8. Again, that the one track kind of, would keep it from ever being a 10, just because, again, it's got that, it doesn't flow at the pace that is pleasing to my ear, but I'm sure other people like it with the poetic lyrics, especially. So, I was very happy with this. So I really did enjoy it. Again, that's my first intro to the Waterboys.
It's an interesting time. I'm not. You think it come out 1988?
Mm-hmm.
And think about the music that was out in 1988.
Yeah,
and it's like, so you were only going to find this, and I only first heard this when I started working at an alternative radio station as a DJ. And that's the first time that I had heard it, and that's the only way you were going to, because think it was all hair bands and pop rap that was out in the late 80s, right? I mean, some metal with Guns N' Roses and things like that. Tracy Chapman was out, maybe the only traditional folk album that would have been out, that was popular if you wanted to warrant that, but you just weren't going to run across it. Though that's why I was drawn to it, because I was like, something completely different than what pop radio is telling us we should listen to.
Yeah.
And
well, it's kind of like what the band did in the 60s. They're in the psychedelic world, and all of a sudden you see their second album, the Brown Album, and it's like these like Civil War vets on the cover.
Yeah.
Like, people are listening to Strawberry Alarm Clock and Jimi Hendrix, and it's like, oh, here are these guys that fought in Gettysburg. It looks like. This is kind of a similar thing, 20 years later with, you've got Madonna and Def Leppard and people like that, the glam, the hair bands, Twisted Sister, all these groups that were, full of production. And then you've got this, salty group of, Scotsmen. Yeah.
Just a bunch of guys that, are probably chugging bourbon in between takes,
Bourbon and Guinness, you have to chase it. Yeah. So, no, that I think that's a great intro episode in terms of, we both found an album that we probably are, it wouldn't kill us to put it in our collection. And they both sound like they're both albums that can continue to grow for us. So with that said, let's then kind of move into what will become episode 2, where we, have to listen to this next album that we're about to introduce to the other guys. So Brian, what do you have some options for episode 2?
Okay, for you, I'm going to give you a couple choices. One I definitely think would be in your wheelhouse, and that's Wilco's Sky Blue Sky. I don't know if you've heard it.
Okay.
Of course, Wilco was one of the offshoots of as a Yo La Tango. When they kind of split up, they became Sonvolt and they became Wilco, which both alternative country bands. Yeah. So I thought maybe that'd be in your wheelhouse to choose from. Then I've got something that's a little different. The War on Drugs, Lost in a Dream, came out, I think, in 2000. I want to say 14 or 15. It's available on Spotify. Both those are available on Spotify to listen to if you need to.
Okay.
The last one is not available on Spotify. You can only find the whole album on YouTube.
Okay.
You can say full album, and that's by Bonnie Prince Billy. I See a Darkness, which I think might be in your wheelhouse as well. But all different. They're all very different type of albums.
And what was
So,
what was the last album called?
I See a Darkness.
I See a Darkness. Okay. Um, I've heard a couple of Wilco albums before. I have AM, which is like my favorite because it's the most similar to Uncle Tupelo and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
War on Drugs, I've heard a couple of their tracks on like indie radio, and I think the track or two that I've heard I like. And the other one, it's completely up in the air for me. But I think out of those three, I want to try War on Drugs.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's called Lost on a Dream.
Yeah, Lost in a Dream.
Lost in a Dream. Yeah, because I always see them like advertised for me, and I never have a reason.
Kurt Vile was a member of them for a while, and then he went solo. Okay. And I know there's some guys that are really into him. He's a really great guitar player.
Yeah. All right, so I have three here. They're three of my favorites.
Okay.
One I just did a video on, and that is Fountains of Wayne. Their last album called Sky Full of Holes, from 2011. It's kind of it's a more acoustic-y version of Fountains of Wayne, but it's still got like a lot of that jangle and a lot of those like catchy hooks that they were known for.
They did Stacy's Mom, right? That was the ones
they did. There's some really good stuff on here. So Sky Full of Holes is the first one. Then another one of my favorite bands, and I don't know if you've done their full catalog or not. It's the Avett Brothers, True Sadness.
Yeah. I've listened to that one.
Listen to that one? Okay.
Yeah, I just bought that on vinyl.
It's a great one.
It's a great album.
And this one is a later day Paul Simon album. I don't know if you've listened to all of Paul Simon's albums or not. This is probably my top 2 or 3 Paul Simons. It's called So Beautiful or So What?
So Beautiful or So What?
Ironically, also from 2011. So, yeah, I've got those 2, and I can pull out another one.
No. Let me do the Paul Simon.
Okay.
I've not listened to anything post Graceland from Paul Simon.
Oh, well, this was a treat. This came out my junior year, I guess, of high school, and I remember listening to it. It has it's kind of Paul Simon's, his aging album, so it's like very introspective. But the critics said it was his best since Graceland. So it's classic Paul Simon. He's always inventing himself, and I think you'll get a lot out of this. So it's a really cool record.
I wrote it down. Excellent.
So, all right. Well, there we go. So next time, whether it's a week or 2 weeks, whenever we decide to regroup, we're going to be doing So Beautiful or So What by Paul Simon, and then Lost in a Dream by War on Drugs. So thank you, everybody, for watching the debut episode. Please comment. Let us know if you've heard the albums that we've swapped back and forth. Comment. Subscribe to Brian's channel if you don't know him already. And we'll see you in, I guess, a week or two for episode 2. So thank you, everybody.
Bye.